Hi, Jenny.
Nice seeing you. On North Korea,
Okay.
do you have any detail on new sanctions on North Korea?
You know I'm going to say
Thank you.
this. You know what I'm going to say, don't you?
Yeah.
We're never going to forecast sanctions. I think what you're referring to is what many are talking about at the United Nations, and that is a situation I'm just not going to forecast right now.
Talking about it. It's a draft resolution that's been released to the council for a vote.
So that is a detail of a draft resolution, and that's something we don't go into the details of a draft resolution on current diplomatic conversations. But you've all read the news, you've seen the reports, and so
What
I'll
about
leave you at that.
Russia's,
Hold on, we're
comments-
not going to Russia just
No,
yet.
Russia's comments preemptively
Ah.
opposing any type of sanctions against
Yeah.
North Korea.
Look,
in addition.
we have had Russia's cooperation at the UN Security Council in the past. What the DPRK has done, and it's, we all know what happened on Sunday night. We all have not yet been together since those activities occurred.
You mean the nuclear test?
I'm talking about the testing that took place, yes. What I want to say about that is that this is not just a security situation for the United States. It's not just a security problem for the United States. This is a security problem for the world. China recognizes that. I think Russia recognizes that. We're getting different levels of cooperation. We were certainly happy when Russia backed the last round of UN Security Council resolutions. China did certainly as well.
What is the administration assessment of the pressure campaign, given that you've had the intelligence assessment come public that they've miniaturized a warhead, you've had a missile fly over Japan, and you've had a hydrogen test?
Yeah.
Is it working?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, a lot of people look at the recent events that have occurred, especially on Sunday night, and ask, is the pressure campaign, is your diplomatic campaign working? It's a legitimate question. It is what we do here at the State Department. We look at pushing and continuing the conversation about the pressure campaign and putting pressure on the DPRK to denuclearize. China shares that concern with us. They also support denuclearization, as does virtually every country across the globe. It is an important issue for us, and it's an important issue for them. Yes, I can say that the pressure campaign is working. Now, when you see a test that took place on Sunday, you may think, goodness, that is not working, but that is not the case, and here's why. It can take a long, long time for sanctions to work. It can take a long time for a pressure campaign to work. It is not an overnight thing. It's not a big, sexy military operation. This is handled very, very differently. We will continue to push forward with this campaign. We are having success. One of the best areas of success that we can point to are all of the countries that we've had diplomatic conversations with, where we have asked those countries and discussed with those countries, and they frankly supported as well, closing down the size of, or excuse me, not closing down the size, limiting the size of DPRK missions in their own countries, limiting the number of guest workers. We've seen some recent success in Spain, in Peru, also Kuwait with regard to that, just to name a few. There are also the independent sanctions that other countries have been willing to do. We've seen that with Australia and many other partners in the region as well. This all will take time. It will take time to help remove that money that the DPRK is getting, and we believe is going to its illegal nuclear and ballistic missile programs. It'll take time to get that money out to really force that regime to come around.
Just real quick, when you
Yeah.
say that China shares the U.S. concerns, is it concerned enough?
Yeah, we've always said this. China can certainly do more. It's also a country that is willing to do some things behind the scenes, and we're happy with that. We don't need to be so public. We don't need to take the credit. We don't need countries to thump their chests in order to show exactly what's going on. This is what diplomacy is. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's not so fun for people who are covering it, because you may not have much to publicly point to, but there are things going on behind the scenes, I can assure you, that is giving us cause to be hopeful for the future. Again, this is something that will take quite some time. It's not going to happen overnight, but that's what we do here. We'll keep pushing forward.
Isn't it though, isn't it a little bit of a race against time? Because if you're saying that it'll take a long, long time, in your words, and some of the commanders have estimated that by the end of in less than a year's time, North Korea not only could have, they've already demonstrated
I think,
the
Elise,
ICBM, but also married it, and so
That's why I think we have, this U.S. government has a multi-pronged approach. Diplomacy is just one part of that. You heard Secretary Mattis talking about the military piece of it. You've heard Secretary Mnuchin talk about the Treasury portion of it. We have Ambassador Haley, who's talking about the UN Security Council portion of it. So we're all working in concert together. I'm just speaking to our one piece of it, and we're plowing ahead. We're moving forward.
But I mean, if you're hoping for a diplomatic solution,
Well,
I mean,
that's
can
always
you-
the
do you
preferred.
have the- I know.
That's
I
always the
understand.
preferred
I
approach,
understand.
the
Yeah,
diplomatic
exactly.
solution.
So do you think you have enough time, if the sanctions are going to take a really long time, do you think you have enough time to let a diplomatic solution play out?
We are going ahead with the diplomatic solution. We are asking countries, our allies, our friends, our neighbors, you name it, anybody we'll sit down and talk with, we are asking them to assist us. And it's not just assisting the United States. It's not, hey, help the United States here. It's help the world. Because the world has joined in condemning the United Nations, the United Nations, the European Union, NATO. All of these nations and entities are coming together condemning DPRK for its activities. So it's not just us, we're all helping out one another.
Just one last one. The president didn't answer when asked today whether part of a solution would be accepting North Korea's nuclear status. What does the administration, and particular Secretary Tillerson?
Our administration's view has not changed. We have long called for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
I understand,
Yeah.
but if you, you know, part of the problem is that, you know, even before this administration, North Korea's program has grown considerably, as you can see. And
Well, let's
as they've
point out, it's taken
demonstrated.
many, many years to get here.
Well, I understand, but, you know, at some point, do you have a choice but to accept them as a nuclear state?
Our position has not changed.
Which is.
We
which is-
want the denuclearization of North Korea. That is what we want. That is what we are pushing for. We will not accept, as Secretary Tillerson has said, a nuclearized North Korea.
Heather, what if the diplomatic solution did not work?
What if it doesn't work?
Yes.
Well, we have the whole of government approach. We
you-
have the Department of Defense. We have the Treasury Department. We have the United Nations, the United Nations Security Council, and we have our piece here at the State Department. So we're just going to keep pushing forward. I'm not going to get into hypotheticals, but we're going to keep pushing forward, and that will not change. We are committed to this. When this president first came into office, his top national security priority, he said, is this, the DPRK, and put Secretary of State Rex Tillerson in charge of that, and that's what we are pushing forward with.
The U.S. has all options on the table. So
All
if you-
options are
yes.
still on the table. That's why we have this multi-pronged government approach. Okay, I think we've exhausted this. Let's move it. Okay.
I understand that you won't talk about the draft resolution
Yeah.
at the UN, but is there any way you can discuss how the State Department feels in terms of cutting off oil to North Korea? Is that something that you guys think is imperative? Where does that fall on the list of diplomatic pressure?
It could be something that would be potentially a very big deal if that were to happen, and that's all I'll say about that.
Is
Okay.
Tillerson making calls to other countries specifically on that topic?
He's made a lot of calls. I don't have a readout or a list of all the calls that he has made recently, but he has been on the phone a lot since Sunday night. He always
And
is,
talking
as a matter of
about
fact. Well, talking specifically about the DPRK. Whether it's been oil in that I'm not aware of, but we continue to have a full, robust approach to our, to what we're looking at with the DPRK. Okay, let's move on to something else. Okay.
China
Hi.
is saying that sanctions can only be part of a package with some kind of dialogue. So is some dialogue, direct talks with North Korea still a goal for you after the latest test?
Well, it's certainly, we would always like to be able to sit down and talk. But North Korea is showing the world that it is not serious, and it is nowhere near the point where it wants to talk. What they did over the weekend and what they've done recently is a tremendous security concern to the world. When they're willing to show us that they are serious about sitting down and having conversations, we will know it. We think we will be watching for the signals, and we'll just go from there.
What did they do over the weekend? Was it a hydrogen test?
I believe there's a very specific term that we want to call it, and I think it's an advanced nuclear test. I think that's what we're referring to it as, the U.S. government. Right? Yeah.
Another nuclear test